In the near future, climate change, deforestation, and a nuclear war have caused so much damage to Earth that little by little most cities all over the world are crumbling down. There is a power and food shortage, plus a dangerous lack of oxygen. By the year 2067, one of the few remaining cities is in Australia, which has been able to hold out thanks to synthetic oxygen. However, this oxygen is polluted and causes people to get ill with something known as the sickness. Ethan White and his best friend Jude do their job as utility workers to keep the neutral reactor stabilized and bring back power to the city. After the workday is over, their boss scans them to be sure everyone is still healthy. One of the workers says he can't come the next day, so Ethan takes his shift to earn extra oxygen credits. However, the boss still fires the poor man. On his way home, Ethan sees a protester talking about oxygen not being a privilege and how they should sacrifice for the next generations. While the passers-by ignore him, Ethan is confronted by the fired worker, who is desperate for work because his children have the sickness. An argument ensues, only to be interrupted when the protester suddenly catches on fire. Later at home, Ethan sees on the news that the protester did that to commemorate the death of the last living plant. The report also mentions the increasing number of deaths due to the sickness and how Crony Corp, the oxygen producer company, promises to find a solution. However, people keep revolting because they're scared humanity will go extinct soon. Then the reporter starts talking about the Crony Corp's dead lead scientist, who was Ethan's father Richard, and this causes him to turn off the TV. At that moment Ethan's wife Xanthi arrives and he gives her a new oxygen mask. As they fool around, Xanthi suddenly vomits blood because she's got the sickness, but Xanthi assures Ethan that she's fine. Sometime later, Ethan is summoned to the offices of Crony Corp and Jude comes along. They meet Regina, the company's chief technology officer, who says Ethan can help them save humanity before taking them to the lab. It turns out they're working on a time machine called the Chronicle, which was invented by Richard 20 years ago. They've been testing it by sending a clock for a few minutes, but they've also sent radio waves and received a reply from 400 years in the future with the words "Send Ethan White." Regina theorizes that people from the future found the cure for the sickness and will only give it to Ethan. The team doesn't know how to get Ethan back though, so he'll have to find the people who sent the message to be able to return. After the meeting, Ethan goes to a bar with Jude to think about Regina's request. Ethan doesn't want to leave Xanthi, but Jude points out that staying means Xanthi dying, while going may mean saving her for years to come. When Jude tries to bring up Richard, Ethan reminds him that his father disappeared after leaving his 8-year son with nothing but a self-deletion note and a weird device on his wrist. Ethan thinks his mother wouldn't have died if Richard had been around, so he refuses to do the same to Xanthi. However, Jude thinks that not to be like Richard, Ethan must save Xanthi. After Jude leaves, Ethan thinks about his 8th birthday. He waited all day for his dad, but Richard arrived late, and his present turned out to be a weird box. He put little Ethan's hand inside this box, telling him he'd have to make an important choice someday, and suddenly an electronic bracelet closed around his wrist, causing it to bleed. As the boy cried in pain, Richard told him that the bracelet wouldn't come off and left the house, ignoring his wife's protests. Then Ethan also can't help remembering his mother's death and decides to go home to tell Xanthi about Crony Corp's plan. He doesn't want to leave her, but Xanthi asks him not to use her as an excuse to avoid saving humanity and to have faith. She also mentions all the kids in her class that have died, saying she's afraid. Later in the evening, Ethan goes to the roof to watch the city and desperately tries to remove the bracelet as he again remembers the day his mother died on the streets. That day Jude found him and shared his oxygen mask with him. In the present, Ethan screams as he makes his decision. The next morning, Ethan leaves a metal flower for Xanthi with a promise that he'll return, unaware that she's actually awake and crying. When he makes it to the Crony Corp's office, he makes a deal with Regina. He won't go unless Xanthi gets the first dose of the cure. Regina accepts and they immediately go to the lab, where the scientist